tried for 45 years to do something called 5-year plans. It was a disaster. We had something called a planning commission. Yeah? And in that planning commission, wise men, and they were almost always men, were supposed to sit there and prognosticate about how the rest of the world was going to turn out. And they were almost always wrong. But they were given enormous powers to plan about the rest of the world. So, the first point is, rigid deterministic planning always fails. It's not about today. It would have failed 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. It's a bad idea because we always live in a volatile, uncertain world. 2, your ability to respond quickly makes a big difference. Flexibility always will beat your ability to plan forward. This does not mean that planning is not important. Planning is important, but for a completely different reason. It is important because it is one way of figuring out what are the contours of your resources and what are its capacities. But plans are useless. This is not my thought. One of the greatest generals of the 19th century, von Moltke, is a Prussian general, considered one of the great generals of all time, said that no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. This is true of economic planning and any other kind of, when you are running a business, you will decide that your business plan is not what will ever plan out. And yet that business plan is important. Why is it important? Just so that you understand the contours. So the planning process is important. The plan is actually should be trashed the moment you come up with a plan. Why? Because the real world will always break through your plan. But the planning process is in order for you to understand what are the pieces that you have, and very importantly to understand the worst case outcomes. This is important. While it is very difficult to figure out how the world will actually pan out, it is not so difficult for you to work out what are the worst case scenarios. There are limited sets of worst case things that can happen. Of course, completely random things can also happen, but you can more or less imagine out what are the really bad things that can happen to you. A few things done up front, few simple things done up front, like creating various kinds of buffers in your system, more or less take care of most of those those kinds of bad worst case scenarios. After that, most of what you have to do is to basically make your world into this rather uncertain way. Your ability and resilience to dealing with uncertainty, rather than your ability to plan upfront some great plan, is what will really stand you in good stead. This brings me to how do we make policies about the future? Through the last 2 years of policy making through COVID, was that even in the middle of all this COVID problems, we continued to do supply side reforms. We privatized Air India, we liberalized the drone sector, we liberalized the space sector, we removed all kinds of useless telecom regulations from the BPO sector. So since I am partly responsible for many of these measures, let me say that when we were doing all of this, many people in the newspapers and experts, etc., were saying, why is the government paying attention to drone sector in the middle of a COVID crisis? Well, let me tell you why. Because you see, we were also very clear that the post-COVID world is not a re-inflation of the pre-COVID world. After having lectured everybody on uncertainty, one thing we know, I have no way of knowing how the post-COVID world will pan out. But I do know that whatever it is not going back to whatever it was before. This new world will have its own geopolitics, its own supply chains, its own technologies, its own consumer behavior, and so on and so forth, its own politics. Everything will be different in this new world. But I have no way of predicting what this will be. So how do I prepare for this new COVID world? Well, much of the rest of the world, unfortunately, expended enormous energies trying to reinflate and keep alive the pre-COVID world. Much of UK's problems today is that they expended all their energy in trying to keep alive their pre-COVID industries. Much of the problems of Europe is because they're trying to keep alive, even today, all their pre-COVID industries. We did not do this. We created a safety net during the period of the shock and then slowly whittled it away. We reintroduced back the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Just as we were privatizing Air India, we allowed one of our largest airlines, Jet Airways, to go bust. What are we investing in? We are investing in flexibility. We in fact even tried to do farm reforms to introduce flexibility into the farm sector markets. So what are we trying to do? What we are trying to do is, rather than expending enormous energy in trying to predict what will happen and getting the wise people of Planning Commission, which we have now shut down, to tell you how the world and what technology is going to turn out to be, we are simply opening things up such that new generation of innovators will come and do new things. I have no way of knowing what those new things will be. One of the strange things that happens very often, that I go to universities and it happened just a few months ago in a program organized interestingly by the alumni of Harvard Business School, where somebody stood up in Harvard Business School's student, young lad, must be around 30 years old, and he says that, I've come back from Harvard Business School, I want to set up my own business. So can you tell me where is it that what businesses are going to be the businesses of the future? So I told him that if I really knew, I wouldn't be the civil servant, would I? I would be Elon Musk. And even if I did know it, why would I tell you? It's your job. You went to Harvard Business School. I didn't go to Harvard Business School. If you don't know, well, shut down Harvard Business School. So this is the point. Do not waste your time trying to work out what the future will be. It's for you to dig through and find it. I have no way of knowing. Nor do you know. Nor did Zuckerberg know when he started out creating Facebook where it would lead. They were just risk-taking. Innovation is about purely jumping into the wild. In fact, many of those who jump into the complete uncertainty very often do not have any idea what they're jumping into, even if they later on come and lecture you in universities like this, that this is what I thought would happen. One of the greatest and biggest changes in the world was the discovery of the Americas by Columbus. Now it turns out Columbus was actually a poor navigator. He had no idea where he was going. He completely miscalculated the circumference of the earth. He found 2 full continents and still he insisted he had found India. And to the last day, he insisted that he had found the route to India, whereas in fact, his discovery was in fact far greater than he had imagined. So the point I'm making to you is, greatest of changes happen because people have the guts to do it. Those who have these guts to do it are not necessarily always the brightest people. They are just the people who did it. And to do it, you have to have the courage to go out and sail westward into the complete unknown.